3D platformers were once a huge deal in the past. Icons like Spyro and Crash Bandicoot were everywhere. Super Mario 64 revolutionized the genre, and Conquer Bad Fur Day proved that platformers could expand their appeal even to adults. It was an extraordinary era marked by a diverse array of exceptional platformers. As the gaming landscape evolved with the advent of the PS2, the genre reached new heights with titles like Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, and numerous other classics. However, amidst the triumphs, there lay a somber reality. For every Jak and Daxter that soared, there were countless platformers that failed to receive enough spotlight. Some were unlucky enough to debut in a period when the industry's focus shifted towards blockbuster shooters and expensive open-world adventures, leaving these gems overshadowed. Today's occasion calls for an exploration of the obscure history of one of the most unknown 3D platformers of all time, Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer, a solid action adventure with an interesting story behind it. To fully delve into the history of Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer, we must rewind the clock to an important moment in Viz Entertainment's timeline, Earthworm Jim 3D. For Viz Entertainment, formerly known as Viz Interactive, Earthworm Jim 3D marked their foray into tackling a beloved and established IP. However, the path to release the game was fraught with challenges. Development of the game began as early as 1996, yet it endured a drawn-out development cycle where it was at times believed it would become vaporware before finally seeing the light of day in 1999. While the ambitious attempt at transforming a popular platformer from the second dimension to the third dimension was met with a mixed reception, it's worth noting that 3D was a tough technology to deal with at the time. Despite the disappointing reception of Earthworm Jim 3D, Viz Entertainment had other plans. Curious to know more about how Brave came to fruition, I contacted one of the producers. After sending an email to Robbie Graham, he told me that shortly after Earthworm Jim 3D was released, the company wasted no time in strategizing for their next platformer, with a better engine, controls, story, physics, and all the crooks that makes a 3D platformer fun. The basic idea was to do a proper 3D adventure game after we released Earthworm Jim 3D, which was our inferior but wackier version of Mario 64. Better combat, better animation, better engine. Robbie Graham, one of the producers behind Brave. However, Brave didn't happen right away. As it turns out, according to the developers, the game went through a convoluted development cycle that lasted for 5 years before seeing the light of day in 2005. This begs a question. What's the story behind the full development of Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer? When did it exactly start? And who came up with the idea first? To find the answers to all of these questions, I have reached out to the entire team behind the game, and just when I was thinking of giving up, 4 developers answered. Yes! Including Robbie Graham, Peter Shea, Brian Gomez, and Kirk Ewing. According to Brian Gomez, Brave's inception was inspired by several artworks and early concept designs created by Viz Entertainment's lead animator Mike Jones. Jones had been experimenting with the studio's in-house engine, envisioning a potential third-person action-adventure game. Intrigued by what Mike Jones managed to brainstorm, Brian Gomez chimed in to provide some of his ideas about the story, concept, and overall game design. Mike Jones laid the groundwork that ultimately inspired Brian Gomez to generate a plethora of ideas, culminating in the creation of Brave, a Native American-inspired game fueled by some of his life experiences. I've been visiting Yosemite National Park in California since I was a child, and I remember hearing legends from the Miwok, Mono, and Paiute people about the origins of Yosemite Valley and its most distinctive feature, Half Dome. There is a legend about a crying girl trapped in the rock that always stuck with me. This is where the seed for the game was first planted and eventually found its way into Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer. Story and script writer Brian Gomez. In the early stages of its development, originally codenamed TomTom at Viz Entertainment before Peter Shea suggested changing the name midway through production, Brave underwent a prolonged cycle of development that lasted for 5 years. According to Assistant Director Peter Shea, Brave wasn't originally planned as a linear 3D platformer. As it turns out, it would have played more like The Legend of Zelda. Brave would enter levels, explore the surroundings, obtain items, and so much more. The game was also quite challenging as opposed to the final release. However, since Sony had great success with their platformer lineup on the PS1, they wanted to keep that momentum going on the PS2. Hence, this initial concept of Brave was ultimately scrapped in favor of a linear 3D platformer targeted at a broader audience, including kids. Once the developers scrapped the initial concept around 2002, they immediately shifted their focus to creating a colorful and charming title while staying true to the original theme, a Native American inspired game that would be accessible and enjoyable for players of all ages. According to Robbie Graham, the game's engine, planning, and overall design took around 18 months to develop, with additional 18 months dedicated to refining and shaping the game. However, there was another twist. The setting of Brave the Search for Speed Dancer isn't based on any particular real-life location according to the developers. Instead, it's based on a fully realized fictional world that bears no resemblance to well-known settings, but according to Robbie Graham, even before the game's engine was developed, the developers had other plans in mind. Way before the engine had been developed, we considered setting the game in a semi-realistic proper-scale version of the Isle of Skye, set in a prehistoric time with lots of wolves. The developers Robbie Graham and Peter Shea all stated that the team drew inspiration from various sources such as books related to Native American history and folklore, platformers like Crash Bandicoot, Super Mario 64 and Jak and Daxter, with a Turok mention stated by Robbie Graham. I suppose Mario 64 floored us in around 96 and we strived to get close to the elegance of the controls in a 3D environment. We also wanted to get a lot of Zelda type action in there as well. Jak and Daxter was also an inspiration. Getting an American theme was, I think, a nod to the primary market. There were few titles set in a fantasy North America at the time. Turok comes to mind, I suppose. Brave the Search for Speed Dancer boasted a team of more than 30 developers, with notable names involved. Mike Jones, who later contributed to Red Dead Redemption 2, and Peter Shea, who went on to work on Hot Wheels World's Best Driver, were among them. Additionally, Robbie Graham, known for his work on Onirally, which sold more than 300,000 copies before being pulled off the shelves due to a dispute between Pixar and Dreamy Design, also played a significant role in the project. The writer behind Brave was Brian Gomez, who also worked on several games like Jericho and Silent Hill Downpour. Other developers who contributed to Brave included Maxwell Cant, who served as the lead world artist on other games such as Black. The game took its time to be developed and was ultimately released on September 2, 2005 in Europe and on April 3, 2007 in North America. The game was built using an evolved version of Viz Entertainment's in-house engine, along with the necessary toolsets the team used to develop most of their games. However, before delving into what happened during the release of the game, let's explore the story of Brave, the gameplay, and some details about the content of Brave the Search for Speed Dancer. Brave the Search for Speed Dancer's narrative may have been geared toward a younger audience, but players fond of platformers will find the story captivating from beginning to end. The game unfolds in a fully realized, vibrant world infused with the essence of native mythology and folklore. Players take on the role of a young Native American boy entrusted with the task of saving his tribe from the clutches of the malevolent Wendigo. To achieve this, Brave embarks on a courageous journey to locate the legendary spirit dancer, believed to be the only one capable of saving his tribe. Most of the game sees Brave traveling from one location to another, engaging in combat against enemies, dabbling in the art of fishing, tracking animals, and acquiring essential items to advance the story. The gameplay is similar to other specimens in the genre, and Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer doesn't shy away from constantly throwing new ideas at the player to keep him engaged. In the beginning, players start with nothing but their trusty stick. As they progress, they get to unlock several tools like the tomahawk, a bow, and even supernatural abilities exclusive to Native Americans. Brave's gameplay is fun for anyone seeking a solid 3D platformer with easy controls and an intriguing story. However, curious to know more about any cut content from the game, I asked Robbie Graham about this. He said, "I think there were probably extra things like trapping and hunting that we never had time to develop." Brave may not have been commercially able to stand out among titans like Jak and Daxter, but its excellent storytelling and exploration of Native American history, imbued with fantasy elements, are compelling enough to fully immerse players in the game. Sony Computer Entertainment of Europe oversaw the development of Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer and funded the project until completion. They published the game on September 2, 2005 in Europe, with plans to publish the game for North America on August 29, 2006. But due to the company's shift towards other priorities, the game's release was delayed and Sony ultimately gave up on the project. BAM Entertainment, however, found this as an opportunity to publish the game. Sony Europe was at one time signed up to be the first-party publisher of the title, but due to changing business priorities, they eventually pulled out and the game went to BAM, who acquired Viz Entertainment. Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer suffered from inadequate marketing and limited magazine exposure in Europe. There were no TV commercials or any promotional material found in magazines released at that time. Making matters even more intense, Brave was launched during a hellish period that saw the release of blockbuster hitters back then. A few examples like Star Wars Battlefront 2, Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories, Resident Evil, and Call of Duty 2 Big Red One come to mind. Still, curious to find about any promotional merchandise, I managed to find an advertisement picture from the Poster Hut website. From their website we can read the following. Originally used to promote the game in the UK, these were never available to the general public. Bear in mind, these posters may have been used to promote the game in store. After Sony Computer Entertainment of Europe shifted focus to other business priorities, BAM Entertainment, the parent company Viz Entertainment, tried to publish the game in North America in 2006. However, financial difficulties dating back to October 2004 and their subsequent delisting from Nasdaq ultimately led to the company's demise, taking Viz Entertainment down with it. So what happened to Brave after both companies filed for bankruptcy? Was Brave published in North America or ultimately cancelled? The answer is yes. The game was published in North America. Just when all hope was lost, IGN announced in one of their blog posts a list of games to be released in the spring season of 2007. From that list, you can see Brave was to be published by another company known as Evolved Games on April 2, 2007. While Brave the Search for Spirit Dancer received disappointing coverage in Europe, the situation was far worse in North America. It seemed as though the game barely even existed in the USA. It didn't also help that Brave's reception was rather mixed. Journalists had higher expectations for a game that didn't promise any. Review sites like GameSpot criticized the game for its lack of ambition. GameBiz found it lacking in innovation, while GameZone labeled it as a clone. PALGN went as far as calling it nothing but an N64 or Dreamcast clone. The abysmal marketing accompanied by the disappointing criticism all contributed to the game's low performance both on the commercial and critical side. The future appeared bleak for Brave, and just when it seemed destined to fade into obscurity like all its brethren in the genre, plans emerged for something greater, a franchise. Before this Entertainment's downfall, the developers immediately began work on a sequel following the original game's release. The sequel was envisioned to be far more ambitious than the original, with plans for an open-world exploration, a sophisticated wildlife AI akin to Far Cry, and a full-fledged action-adventure experience. Unfortunately, this promising idea never came to fruition, as this Entertainment's demise, coupled with Sony's withdrawal of funds from the project, ultimately led to the sequel's demise. Brave 2 was well underway along with other two games. It was around 25% complete when Sony pulled the plug. Soon after this, in 2005, this Entertainment was no more. Pete Shea, however, said the following: "Yeah, we were doing some cool stuff on Brave 2 before this went down. It was much more open and had state machine-driven AI wildlife like Far Cry 2 did later. The programmer who did that went on to do all the AI and more for Rockstar North. After discovering hints of a sequel's existence, I scoured the internet in search of anything related to Brave 2, but my efforts were in vain. It wasn't until I reached out to Ivan Halley, who runs a YouTube channel dedicated to preserving beta trailers and cancelled projects, that he shared an archived link mentioning Brave 2. Sadly, the archived website by artist Matthew Cullen had broken images. Nonetheless, this should serve as strong proof that Brave 2 existed. The story didn't end there. It appears there were ambitious plans for a Brave animated series that never came to fruition either. I discovered this through Brian Gomez's response to an email in which he said, London production company Tiger Aspect had optioned the rights to the IP and were developing an animated series based on the game, which I was consulting for. He continued, the rights then ended up with Kickstart Productions in Los Angeles and the TV pilot was created, but the series was not picked up. According to Piche, there were plans in place to promote the series, including promotions with various toys to be featured at areas like McDonald's and other places frequented by children. That idea was also cancelled. All plans to make Brave into a series ended in cancellation. When interest from Sony and other publishers seemed to fade, one publisher proved the opposite. In a series of acquisitions and business expansions, South Peak Games began acquiring several businesses to broaden its horizons back in 2005. 2 years later, the company would start acquiring video game publishers and developers along with the rights to several IPs. Brave happened to be one of them, although it was never publicly disclosed. It wasn't until August 2027 that South Peak Games unveiled 4 of its upcoming handheld and console titles at the GC Developers Conference in Leipzig, Germany. As we delve deeper into IGN's blog post, we stumble upon a mention of Brave coming to 4 platforms: the Nintendo Wii, the DS, the PSP, and the Xbox 360. Other games are also unveiled, all slated for release in 2009. However, this is where things start to become unclear. The DS game was revealed as Brave Shaman's Challenge, a spin-off of Brave the Search for Spade Dancer. Unlike its 3D counterpart, this game was a puzzle video game that played similarly to Tetris. The player would be tasked with manipulating several blocks on screen, scoring points, and completing levels, much like in Tetris. Brave Shaman's Challenge was originally planned for a February 17, 2009 release, but it was ultimately cancelled, silently, without any announcement or anything. Whether the original team has worked on this game or not remains obscure. A peculiar situation unfolded back in 2009. As mentioned in the previous chapter, Brave was scheduled to be released on 4 platforms: the DS, the Wii, the PSP, and the Xbox 360. While the DS game was quietly cancelled, the other platforms remained unaffected yet. As we read through the article dated July 10, 2008, we learned that several titles from South Peak Games were slated to make an appearance during E3 of that year. However, Brave was notably absent from the lineup at the time. The E3 show of South Peak Games has shown all of the games from the blog post, except for Brave. Things became even murkier when the PSP release suffered the same fate as the DS spin-off game, quietly cancelled without prior notice. What adds to the mystery is the discovery that actual box covers for the PSP release were made, complete with an age rating. This whole situation begs the question, was the game ever released on the PSP? Delving deeper into this bizarre situation sent us to a Reddit thread where a user shared the same question. Users have shared links to various gaming websites like Engadget, which have documented the press release of Brave, A Warrior's Tale coming to PSP and several other platforms. Now, here is where things become interesting. Several links were shared by several users mentioning a listing of the PSP game on Amazon. Surprisingly, the game wasn't only available for sale on Amazon. Other retail stores like the Gamesman and Jax also had it available for purchase at one point in time. Or maybe not. Nobody knows what the hell happened. While some users insist the game was released in limited quantities, others claim it never saw the light of day. Nobody knows. After the DS and the PSP's quiet cancellation, two platforms remained unaffected, the Wii and the Xbox 360. Brave, A Warrior's Tale, according to a South Peak press release, would have acted as an expanded reinvention of the original PS2 game, Brave, The Search for Speed Dancer. The enhanced edition of Brave wasn't developed by the original team at Viz Entertainment, instead it was by a lesser-known developer, Collision Studios. While their track record, as documented by several websites, featured games that didn't perform well commercially, their attempt at reviving an obscure platformer like Brave was certainly bold. Brave, A Warrior's Tale would eventually be released in 2009 across North America, Europe and Germany. It was after a series of financial difficulties at South Peak Games and the game being silently omitted from the E3 2008 show and later shown in the following year in the most disappointing way possible that Brave finally saw the light of day on the Xbox 360 and the Nintendo Wii. How did the game perform compared to the original game? Commercially, worse. Critically, even worse. Brave, A Warrior's Tale had the misfortune to be released during what everybody would call a nightmare period for 3D platformers. The year 2009 saw the release of high-profile blockbusters like Resident Evil 5, Halo 3 ODST, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Batman Arkham Asylum, Uncharted, and many others. Realistically speaking, there was no way for Brave to succeed in this nightmarish era, as players had already moved away from the genre and focused heavily on staying up to date with high-profile shooters, boasting an exquisite sense of realism. It also didn't help that Brave, A Warrior's Tale suffered from the same marketing as its predecessor, with only one Spanish print ad found in the official Xbox 360 magazine. All attempts to make Brave a franchise since 2005 have been met with a series of failures. It was clear from this moment that 3D platformers were no longer as popular as they were. Five years after the release of Brave, A Warrior's Tale, South Peak Games vanished from the public eye, taking Brave along with it. Nobody really knows who owns the IP or if South Peak Games sold it somewhere. As for whether Brave will ever make a return or not, it remains very uncertain. However, optimistically speaking, for that to happen, Brave needs to have a vocal community advocating for the game, which, sadly, it currently lacks. The game is obscure and has been long forgotten. Adding to the tragedy, Brave, A Warrior's Tale isn't backwards compatible with the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X. The future of Brave is looking bleak, but in the meantime, all we can do is keep remembering Brave in this entertainment's attempt at something ambitious, a Native American inspired franchise that never came to fruition.